What's up guys, this is Chris here, and today we have another top 5 for you. However, today is going to be a sad top 5. Today we're going to be talking about 5 handguns that I really hate shooting. Now I would argue that this is the first gun I've ever owned that I think I would rather have a sharpened stick. And they're going to be for a couple of different reasons. Some of them are going to be ergonomic, some of them are going to be recoil, some of them are just going to be because they're cheap and they suck. This list is going to be very subjective, as with a lot of my lists and reviews, because it is my opinion and my opinion alone. It's my opinion based on a large amount of experience shooting firearms. I've shot many of the handguns that exist in the world. I shoot for a living and I shoot almost every day. I tried to choose 5 of these that I really freaking hate, so hopefully you can avoid that experience in the future. There's a lot of guns on the market today and there's a lot of amazing firearms that you can choose from, so I try to eliminate some of the ones that I think you should skip over. Before we get into the video, I do want to mention my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys very much. It's because of you the channel exists. You're the main supporters of the channel and we really appreciate it. If you like the honest gun content, all you have to do is go to the link in the description below, sign up, and you can be a part of it. Also, there is a link to a local shelter in Ames, Iowa. It's the links in the description. It's the YSS. It is a youth shelter and those kids could really use your help, so I'd really appreciate it if you would go down to the link and donate a couple bucks to those kids. Now, let's get into the video and we'll start with number 5. Now number 5, as all lists go, it's gonna go least hated to most hated. So let's get into it with a gun that almost didn't make it on the list, but it did just for my own personal bias. And that is gonna be the Colt King Cobra. Now the Colt King Cobra was a gun that I bought with glee. I was very excited, I was happy about it. Before I bought the King Cobra, I did own the Colt Python and I did own the Colt Anaconda. And the Colt Python is one of my absolute favorite revolvers of all time. Very iconic, been used in many movies, been used in many law enforcement agencies, and a lot of people in the know have used the Python. At one point in its life, it was arguably the best revolver in the world. The Anaconda is its bigger brother. It is the 44 mag version of it, and I absolutely love that gun as well, and I shoot it on YouTube Shorts all the time. So if you're interested in that, I haven't done a full video on it, but I do shoot it pretty frequently. The Colt King Cobra, despite its name, King Cobra is actually the smaller version, because I guess King Cobra is smaller than a Python and an Anaconda. So, makes sense. But the King Cobra, in my opinion, is the worst of the 3. Now, it's partly because of the trigger. I felt like the trigger was not nearly as good. The sighting system is not nearly as good, although the Python and Anaconda do have adjustable rear sights that can go out of whack. The Colt King Cobra had a Tross sight, and I felt that it was very difficult to get accuracy on target. Now, that's normally not a problem with snub-nose revolvers. However, the King Cobra is actually not that small. It is a 3-inch revolver and it has a 28-ounce overall weight. Now, its capacity is, I believe, 6 rounds, but the main thing I didn't like about it was gonna be the very rough double-action trigger. Now, one of the things I've noticed with this is I can't really shoot it super quick because that kind of that drag on the back end of the trigger. It seems like I have to stage the trigger a lot more than I normally do. I felt for the MSRP of like $900, it should be better than my Smith & Wessons, it should be better than my Rugers, it should be better than some of the Taurus revolvers I have, in which case it just was not. Mine was really bad, and I felt like the quality control on it was not that great either. I've heard that Colt has some quality control issues, and that was kind of the first experience that I've had with it. My Python, phenomenal, super light trigger, very easy to shoot. Anaconda, super smooth, butter cylinder, but the Colt King Cobra had timing issues right out of the box. It had some lockup issues. The trigger was rough and gritty, and the main thing is the way the grip actually works. It has kind of a cutout at the back, and just for whatever reason, that just bumped the shit out of my hand every time I shot it. When I close my grip on this gun, there's no space at all for my left hand, so when I put my hand in there, I'm kind of going like this, and I don't really have anything to press my left hand on in order to control the trigger. And a lot of times trigger control is about how good and how strong your left hand is, because you can slap the trigger all you want as long as your grip is really, really good. And on a semi-auto, when I start going really fast, I start slapping the trigger more, my grip can keep me steady. Whereas on this, not really. So I end up having to slow down a little bit and staging the trigger. Doesn't mean you can't get hits. It just means apparently you're gonna get less hits. Now I can shoot my Ruger LCR in 357 and it's a much lighter, smaller handgun, 2-inch barrel as opposed to 3, and it's like 21 ounces as opposed to 28, and it has much less recoil than the King Cobra. I felt like it was one of the least shootable guns that I've tried, and because of the expectation of excellence and because of the price tag that came with it, man, I hated it so much I didn't even do a full review, and I've already traded it, which is why I don't have it in my hands right now. So if you're waiting for a full 1,000-round review of that, don't hold your breath. Now, in at number 4 is a gun I haven't done a 1,000-round review yet, but I will, and it's gonna be mostly shot by the missus, and it's for a couple of reasons, and that's gonna be the new Beretta Cheetah 80X. Now, the Beretta Cheetah 80X is the darling of YouTube, and every YouTuber that I've seen do a review on this liked it, apparently except for me. Now, that could be because I'm a big Viking-looking motherfucker, and I have big old hands, and I'm 6'4". For whatever reason, the rear strap here is super uncomfortable to me. Now, as you can see, this brown stuff here that looks like dried blood, that's because it is. Every time I shoot this gun, it makes me pay for it. And not just in money, but in blood tax as well. All right, so I just want to show you this before we keep going, that the beaver tail on this gun is for some reason dropped down, which is probably the silliest design I've ever seen. You don't need that much space for the hammers. You can see here, you could eliminate all this or face it up, because what this beaver tail is doing is it's digging into my hand right here, and every time I shoot, that thing's kicking me right in the hand, and it's busted me open now after 2 magazines, so we'll see where this goes. It literally busts me up every single time I shoot it. On top of that, for a relatively large gun of a 3.9-inch barrel, a 25-ounce 380 pistol, it actually has some pretty sharp recoil. Now, the reason for that is because of the blowback operation that the gun uses. And if you would consider that you can get this basically full-size 380 with a 13-round capacity that has really sharp recoil and hurts the crap out of my hand, also happens to be relatively large and unconcealable by comparison to a lot of the 380s. If you compare this to like the Ruger Max 380 or maybe the SIG P365 and 380, I would consider this a far inferior gun. Now, that's gonna be hard to say because between the Colt King Cobra and this, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be strung up on a whole bunch of forums because there are so many fans and followers and people that absolutely love this gun. I was afraid to put this on the list, and that's why I wanted to specify that it's my list and my opinions. They're reliable guns, they're accurate guns, they have a good capacity, and for most people, they feel great. But for me, I don't like the safety. I don't like the safety decocker. I don't really like the fact that the slide has an open top on it. Now, I deal with that for the Beretta 92, but as far as this, it seems a little smaller and a little harder for me to grab. And I know that sounds dumb, but it's, again, I think it's just a big guy thing. But really the main thing is gonna be the blowback operation, and it's just gonna be this. That for some reason, they took the beaver tail and they kind of angled it down. And I know that anybody that has like full-size man hands that I've noticed that I've had shoot this had a problem with it. And I think that's not gonna be an issue on your smaller statured people, but for me personally, I do feel like this was very uncomfortable, and for the price tag of $800 and for the high expectation I had for this, I expected it to outperform, outshoot, and be much quicker than the P365 or the Ruger Max because they're much smaller, lighter guns, and it just didn't do that. So I don't really have any interest shooting this. So when you do see the full review, you're gonna see a couple of mags from me after the first shots, but not much. All right, now that we got some of my personal bias out of the way, let's get into some real shit boxes. First up, we're gonna go with, not this guy, but I brought it out as an example. I wanted to talk about today is the Taurus 1911. Now, the 1911 is my favorite gun. It's freaking America's gun. 2 World Wars. And if you don't like it, just stop watching the video. I know there's a lot of pros and cons to it, and there's more cons to the 1911 today than maybe some striker-fired pistols, but it's a beautiful gun, it has character, and it has one of the best triggers in the world. And the Taurus doesn't do any of the things the 1911 does right, well, and it does all the things it does bad the worst, if that makes any sense. So all the worst things you get in 1911, you get those in droves with the Taurus, and all the best things about the 1911, you don't get those at all. So you get the low capacity of a standard 1911, right? You get the grip safety and the manual safety, which a lot of people don't like, and the Taurus does that the worst. The grip safety was very difficult to use, and the manual safety I didn't like as much as some of my other guns, like the Gerson, for example. But the main thing I didn't like about it was that it was unreliable, classic Taurus, and also the trigger was 9 pounds. So I have a 1911 with a 2-pound trigger. I have a Gerson right here that's running about 4. And now keep in mind that the Gerson is the same price as the Taurus. So don't say it's like a cheap versus expensive thing, because I've shot this and I've shot the Rock Island, which comes in around the same price as the Taurus, and both those had great single action triggers. And let's be honest, that's why you buy 1911. The trigger is the biggest interface with the user as far as the handgun goes, and the reason why you're missing is almost always trigger control. No, your sights aren't off low and left, your trigger finger is. You need to be able to pull that trigger back to the rear, completely straight without deviating the sight picture, and you can do that the easiest on a lighter, shorter trigger, of which the 1911 generally has the best. Now, if you get into a Taurus 1911 and you say you don't like 1911s, that's because you didn't really get a 1911. You got a 9-pound single action trigger on a gun that shouldn't even freaking exist. So I would recommend that unless you want an unreliable gun that's very difficult to shoot, I would get into maybe a Gerson or a Rock Island, or just step up your game and get a Springfield, Colt, or Wilson Combat. All right, now even the Taurus can't compare as far as shit boxes go to the next two. And I wasn't really sure where to place these as far as 1 and 2, because they're pretty much the devil spawn, and they're guns that I literally kept just because I didn't want to sell them to anyone else, so they had to experience this. And I often get a laugh trying to get people to shoot these at my house when they come over to do gun reviews. So a lot of times we have people with other channels or my friends come over and shoot handguns, like Nick from PewView, for example, who's one of the greatest shooters I've ever shot with, and I shoot with him a lot. And a lot of times we play games with each other and we try to get each other to shoot dumb handguns. For example, he's gotten me to shoot a bunch of Derringers that I can't stand that would probably be on this list, but I don't ever shoot them because they're too small for my hands and they fly out of my hands when I shoot them. So I have not a lot of experience with those, but I do have experiences with these two. And the first one up is going to be the standard manufacturing double barrel 22 Magnum revolver. Well, that's interesting. And if you've never heard of that, that's okay. Most people haven't either. This thing is super unique, and when I bought it, I was super excited. After the first couple of shots, I wasn't excited anymore. As a matter of fact, if you go watch the first shots, you can see the glee just run right out of my face as I shoot it, and by the end, I can barely stand this thing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's cool, and that's the only reason why it's better than the number 1. But as far as function goes, it's freaking awful. Let's start with the features. 1, you have the shortest sight radius in history. 2, the sights are not even on target. 3, the grip feels weird. 4, it's unreliable, it has lockup problems, and for whatever reason, you can never get this thing to work like it's supposed to work. Now, a couple of pros. It has a high capacity of 8 rounds, but technically it's only 4 because it fires 2 at the same time. As you can see there, it is in fact a double barrel revolver, which is unique and it is cool, but doesn't work very well. And if you're trying to hit anything past 25 yards, you're better off throwing it at it. Well, it didn't shoot there.
I'm gonna stand behind.
Now, part of that is due to the double barrel design. As you can see that you're just no way you're going to zero a pair of sights on 2 different barrels. But the main reason is how the gun actually works in the first place. So what we have down here is a double fingered trigger for some reason with a trigger safety on it. And that's a problem. Now, I'm not sure if they thought maybe that the weight of the trigger, which is tremendous, is too much for just 1 finger. However, the design itself creates another inherent problem. So first, we have a very heavy trigger pull with 2 fingers instead of 1, right? So you have to gauge the trigger safety, then you have to bring your middle finger down, and this is how you pull the trigger, like that. It's a lot like a staple gun. So imagine taking a staple gun, putting the sights on it, and putting 2 different staple barrels on it, and then trying to hit something. And that's a lot what it feels like. It feels like this is a mix between the world's worst handgun and a staple gun. Like if a staple gun fucked a high point, this is what we have. So the second problem with that is going to be if you didn't see where I have to place my hand. So this gun has a lot of recoil. And it shouldn't because it's a 22 Magnum, but it does because it's super light and it's actually 2 22 Magnums going off at the same time. So we have here a 10-ounce weight. that's freaking light. And if you consider the fact that it's like less than half the weight of a Glock 19, you can understand why there's not a lot of mass to hold back the recoil, so a 22 mag does feel a little bit more than it should. But what really is the problem is, first off, revolvers don't have any recoil mitigating system in them, right? So there's no recoil spring or hammer spring or anything to stop you. The second thing is the axis is high on a revolver normally, but not as high as this gun. So when I come down here to use the trigger, as you can see, I can't choke up on the handgun like this and pull a trigger like I normally would and use all these fingers to control recoil. What I actually have to do is put my hands down here like this, use my ring finger, pinky finger off the gun. Both these fingers have to come down because there needs to be space to clear, because when the trigger hits the bottom, as you can see there, it covers most of the grip. Now, I'm not sure what genius thought this up, but this is a bad design. What is the point of the finger grooves if you can't use the finger grooves? Like, what is the point of most of the grip if you can't use it? And why wouldn't you just make the damn grip longer if you knew you could only have one finger on it while you were shooting? So not only is it a staple gun, but it's a staple gun that recoils like a 357 Magnum with a trigger that's like 20 freaking pounds. I have never seen a gun that is probably designed worse than this. And that being said, I might show you one. Now, for a price of around $400, be aware that you could get into something like a Canic or a used M&P, or maybe an M&P Shield, or even a cheaper P365 Shield Plus, something like that. But you can get it in an IWI Masada Slim. All those guns are gonna be shockingly superior to this. So the only reason I would consider buying this would be as a joke or as kind of a fun thing to shoot once in a while, which is probably the only justification for this existing. All right, now let's get into number one. The handgun I hate the most. And I should say, before I do that, I do want to do an honorable mention for Derringers, because I don't really like any Derringer, but I like them so little that I don't shoot them on the channel. And maybe I'll get a couple. Leave in the comment section below if you want to see me tortured by some Derringers. My buddy Nick actually has like one that's this big that I think is like 45 ACP. It's god awful. But that being said, let's get into number one, the Altor. And no, this is not a lighter. No, this didn't come out of a 1980 Caprice. This is not, this is not a, that's what it looks like too. It looks like something you would light a cigar with. But this is really a single shot 9mm pistol. So what you do is, what you're doing is you're sliding around onto this little shelf here with kind of an exposed primer there. And then you kind of have to sheath the bullet that's touching the firing pin and the primer at the same time, which is a little scary. So, all right, we'll try this out, and I think we pull the trigger back. What a shit show that is. You take the barrel here, and you load the round on this little sleeve right here, and then you take the barrel, and you lock it up. I haven't used this in a while, so we're gonna be learning together here. There we go. You lock it up in there, and then what you do is it has a little crossbolt safety right here, and then you pull the trigger to the rear like this, which I can barely even do, and then you slingshot it forward, and it hits the firing pin and shoots off the gun. Now, the same problem that you have with the standard manufacturing revolver, you also have with this thing, whereas the trigger gets in the way of your finger, so even though there is a finger placement for it, you actually have to place it one lower, and then you're doing this weird thing with your finger, this trigger pull you've never done before, and also your recoil control is out the fucking window, because as you can see here, this is the only thing I'm holding on this gun while it's shooting, and there's no texture at all. So when it's hot and sweaty outside, a lot of times this thing wants to bump right out of your hand. And on top of bumping out of your hand, this thing smacks you right in the middle of your hand there, because there is no weight to this at all. It's 10 ounces, and it's a single shot 9mm. So if you put like plus P on this, wow, it's gonna feel like a 44 Magnum. Nope. Jesus, this thing has some recoil.
It looks like it, honestly.
It does. It's no joke, because it weighs nothing. It's a couple of ounces. It's a full 9mm with no recoil spring, and it's really the ergonomics. Like if you could get up on it like this, and you could control it, like get a high grip on it, but you can't, because now your trigger finger, there's nowhere to go. So you have to go all the way down here, like I was saying, and this just wants to fly out of your hand every single time. The second thing is, obviously you can see accuracy goes out the window with a slingshot trigger as well, because that's not a mechanism anybody's familiar with. The third thing is going to be the sights are essentially plastic nubs that are pushed together, as you can see here. It has a roll pin in it, and these were just two pieces that were sandwiched together. Very high quality. And then finally, what you have is a single shot that you're not going to be able to hit anything with, that's too much recoil, that takes a gazillion years to reload, and half the time it doesn't work. So a lot of times that you're going to have failures with the way the gun locks up, but most of the time you're going to have failures with your attempt to put the trigger back far enough to slingshot it forward to actually hit the firing pin. So a lot of times you'll see us when we're shooting it, we have to like pull it back once, it doesn't work, pull it back twice, and then it goes off. So not only do you have no recoil control and the gun kicks a lot, but you're always surprised by it going off, and not in a good way. Oh. Hit though. I flinched like a bitch there. So it sometimes can be a labor of love to shoot this, but it is one of the cheapest guns in the world. It's like $100, and it is sort of unique. So even though it looks like a butane lighter, it's weirdly kind of cool. That's why I keep it, but it is horrible to shoot, and I would not recommend it at all. Those are 5 handguns I hate shooting. I'm sure we have some more that maybe I hate worse, but those were just the ones on the top of my head. If you want to see another one of these, we can do a few of these too. And if you want to add stuff, just put it in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please support our local homeless shelters, and remember to recycle. I'll check you later.